I think he's hiding something. He was telling me that there was women writing to him.
Okay. If he thinks he's gonna make a fool out of me again, I mean, he's crazy. That's not gonna happen.
The moment that sets everything in motion doesn't happen during a loud argument or a dramatic confrontation. It happens quietly, late at night, when most people would assume the tension had already settled for the day. Earlier, Natalie had made something very clear. After everything that had happened between them, she needed space. She told Gino directly that he would be sleeping on the couch, not in her bed, not next to her. The boundary wasn't subtle, it was direct. And for a while, it seemed like Gino accepted that. But sometime during the night, that boundary suddenly became flexible. Gino later explains that he felt lonely. That being alone on the couch made him think about their past, about how close they used to be. According to him, the feeling pushed him to do something he framed as a romantic gesture. Instead of staying where he was told to stay, he quietly walked into Natalie's bedroom and slipped into her bed. It's the kind of moment that immediately raises questions, because from one perspective, it could look like a man trying to reconnect with someone he cares about, someone who misses the emotional closeness they once had. But from another perspective, it looks very different. It looks like someone ignoring a very clear boundary that had been set only hours earlier. That tension sits right at the center of what happens next. The surprising part isn't that Gino climbed into the bed. The surprising part is Natalie's reaction when it happened. She didn't throw him out. She didn't demand that he go back to the couch. Instead, the night continued with the two of them lying there together. They talked. They cuddled, and by the time morning came around, the atmosphere between them had shifted in a way that nobody watching could have predicted just hours earlier. But that shift creates its own kind of confusion, because emotional closeness doesn't automatically erase the issues that were already there. And in this case, those issues were the entire reason Natalie had sent him to the couch in the first place. When morning arrives, the mood between them looks calmer. There's an awkward comfort in the air. The kind that sometimes happens when two people reconnect physically before they've actually resolved anything emotionally. Gino seems to interpret the moment as progress. To him, waking up next to Natalie feels like a sign that things might be turning around, that maybe the distance between them isn't as permanent as it seemed. But Natalie's reaction tells a slightly different story. She doesn't act angry about what happened during the night. At the same time, she doesn't pretend that everything is suddenly fine either. When she talks about it, there's hesitation in her voice. The kind of hesitation that suggests she's still trying to figure out her own feelings. Yes, they shared a moment. Yes, they felt close again. But that closeness doesn't automatically rebuild trust. And trust is the real issue here. Natalie openly admits that she still feels uncertain about where things stand. Being next to him again brings back memories, emotions, familiarity. But those emotions exist alongside something else, doubt. She doesn't know if Gino has actually changed, and that uncertainty creates a complicated dynamic between them throughout the morning. On the surface, the interaction feels almost normal. They talk casually. At one point, Natalie even helps him apply lotion to his back, a small gesture that shows there's still some level of comfort between them. But underneath those small moments of normalcy, the larger question never disappears. Is this relationship actually healing? Or are they just slipping back into old patterns? Because if you step back and look at what happened the night before, the situation becomes even more complicated. Natalie set a boundary. Gino crossed it. And instead of confronting that decision, the moment turned into a form of intimacy. That kind of dynamic can mean very different things depending on how you interpret it. Some people might see it as romantic persistence. Others might see it as someone testing how far they can push before facing consequence. And Natalie herself doesn't seem completely sure which version she's dealing with. That uncertainty becomes clearer when she starts talking about what it would actually take for them to rebuild anything serious. For Natalie, it's not going to happen overnight. She makes that point very clear. Trust isn't something that magically returns just because two people shared a moment of closeness. If Gino wants another real chance with her, he's going to have to prove that things are different this time. Not with words, with action. But the way Gino interprets the situation reveals something interesting about the difference between their perspectives. From his point of view, the night they spent together feels like a step forward, almost like a signal that the door to their relationship has opened again. And when Natalie later mentions that her friends are hosting a potluck dinner, Gino immediately sees it as an opportunity. In his mind, meeting someone's friends isn't casual. It's a sign that the relationship is becoming more serious, that he's being welcomed into a part of her life that usually isn't open to just anyone. So when Natalie casually invites him to come along, Gino doesn't hesitate. He accepts right away. To him, this looks like progress, but the moment raises another layer of question. Because while Gino sees the invitation as a relationship milestone, Natalie's motivation isn't necessarily that simple. Inviting him doesn't mean she's fully convinced about the future. If anything, it might mean the opposite. Sometimes introducing someone to your friends isn't about celebration. Sometimes it's about evaluation. Friends often notice things that we overlook when emotions are involved. They ask uncomfortable questions. They pick up on behavior patterns that the people inside the relationship might try to ignore. And Natalie's friends, as it turns out, are not the type of people who stay quiet when something feels off. Gino walks into this invitation thinking he's being welcomed deeper into Natalie's life. But he has no idea that this dinner is about to place him under a microscope he wasn't expecting. Because once the conversation starts flowing, someone is going to ask a question that completely changes the direction of the night. Gino steps into the room with a mixture of excitement and nerves. On the surface, this is supposed to be a friendly gathering, a casual potluck hosted by one of Natalie's closest friends. To him, it's a chance to show that he's part of her life now, that he's integrated into her social world. But what starts as casual conversation quickly begins to feel like a subtle test, one where every word, every gesture, and every glance is being measured. At first, the atmosphere is light. People are chatting about food, work, and weekend plans. Gino tries to laugh along, making small talk, hoping to appear relaxed and personable. He keeps glancing around for Natalie, not just to feel reassured, but because part of him wants validation that he's still welcome, that this closeness from the night before hasn't shifted. There's warmth in the room, but it's fragile. An invisible line of tension exists, waiting to snap the moment someone notices the crack. And then, it happened. Natalie steps out of the room for a moment, leaving Gino alone with her friend. That short absence changes the energy instantly. It's subtle at first, just a slight shift in posture, a sharper focus in the eyes of the friend. The questions come, not with dramatic punctuation, but with precision. The kind that cuts through the surface level friendliness and goes straight to the truth. Are you talking to other women? The friend asks. It's a question designed to test him. A probe into both honesty and integrity. Gino's immediate reaction is a complex mixture of hesitation and impulse. He's caught between two instincts: protect himself or be honest. And in a move that he probably thinks will demonstrate transparency and maturity, he admits it. He doesn't hedge. He doesn't soften the truth. He just says yes. Several women are messaging him, and yes, he's been responding. On the surface, it might seem like a moment of courage. After all, honesty is usually a virtue, especially when rebuilding trust. But here, context changes everything. The critical detail that Gino either underestimates or ignores entirely is that Natalie doesn't know anything about these interactions. He's revealing this to her friend first, someone outside the direct relationship, creating a third-party transmission of sensitive information. It's a miscalculation that transforms what he believes is honesty into a self-inflicted problem. The friend immediately notices Gino's subtle body language. There's avoidance in his eye contact, a slight hesitation in his voice, and a defensiveness that he doesn't even realize he's projecting. Suspicion grows almost organically. The friend senses the history behind the admission, not just what he's saying, but what it implies about patterns in the past. The audience can already sense the tension building here. Gino has walked right into a trap of his own making. And while Gino continues to justify his actions internally, thinking, I'm being honest, I'm showing I'm not hiding anything, the layers of complication start to pile up. He has opened the door for speculation about his motives, and in doing so, he's also resurrected the memory of past mistakes. Fans watching this story can't help but notice the parallel with previous behavior. Gino once hid things, and now, whether intentionally or not, he's repeating a version of that secrecy. It's lying by omission framed as candor. Meanwhile, the audience is positioned to know more than Natalie does. This creates an internal tension unique to reality TV storytelling. Viewers understand the unfolding consequences before the character does. Every casual gesture Gino makes while talking to her friend now carries a double meaning. Is he relaxed because he's confident? Or is he subtly aware that he's stepping into dangerous territory and just doesn't want to show it? The ambiguity adds to the tension, layering the act with psychological complexity. The social dynamics continue to escalate. The friend leans forward, asking more pointed follow-ups, clarifying the scope of Gino's interactions with these other women. Each question forces him to navigate an increasingly narrow path between seeming sincere and appearing reckless. And in this space, the narrative invites the audience to consider broader questions. Is Gino genuinely engaging with these other women out of casual interest, or is he unknowingly repeating behaviors that damage his past relationships? The open loop lingers. What was his intention? Really? Even as the conversation unfolds, another psychological angle emerges. The tension isn't just about who he's talking to or why, it's about secrecy itself. Natalie's concern, and the concern of anyone watching closely, is not about the act of talking to other women, it's about the concealment. The breach of transparency, the hidden layer, is what threatens trust more than the messages themselves. History has conditioned Natalie to react not just to present circumstances, but to patterns that echo past betrayals. And then comes the turning point. The friend, sensing that Gino's admission has introduced a risk, decides to take immediate action. She excuses herself from the group, walks outside, and seeks out Natalie. The approach is methodical, deliberate, almost like a scene being set up in slow motion for maximum tension. The moment Natalie sits down, the words drop, Gino is talking to other women. The impact of that revelation is immediate. Natalie's expression shifts, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The casual warmth that existed moments ago evaporates. Suspicion and doubt creep in, reshaping the emotional landscape. What makes this moment so gripping isn't just Natalie's reaction, it's the fact that Gino has no awareness of it. He is inside the room, oblivious to the storm that has just begun outside. The audience is now watching multiple layers at once: Gino's perspective, the friend's intervention, and Natalie's dawning realization. The tension is compounded by the knowledge that this conversation will inevitably circle back to him, and when it does, the stakes will feel exponentially higher because the trust he's supposed to be rebuilding is now questioned before any direct confrontation. This act also highlights the split perspectives that emerge among fans and viewers. On one hand, Gino is technically single. He's allowed to communicate with other women. On the other, if his goal is to rebuild a relationship with Natalie, why has he not been transparent directly with her? The duality creates moral tension, inviting the audience to take sides or at least to wrestle with the nuances themselves. Is Natalie overreacting because of prior hurt? Or is Gino proving that nothing has fundamentally changed? The ambiguity keeps viewers invested, ensuring that the story doesn't resolve neatly in this act. The emotional stakes rise further when Natalie, now aware of the situation, articulates the depth of her feelings. The words she chooses carry weight beyond the immediate moment. If he thinks he can make a fool of me again, he's crazy. It's a line that underscores not just disappointment or anger, but a crystallization of boundaries she refuses to compromise on. The audience sees that her reaction is about more than the social faux pas or the hidden messages. It's about respect, pattern recognition, and the willingness to tolerate deception. And yet, even with this rising tension, Gino remains in the dark. The unfolding drama is layered, with each character acting based on different knowledge sets. The friend now functions as the messenger, the intermediary revealing truths before the person at the center of them can process their implications. This narrative device keeps viewers engaged, holding them on edge as they anticipate the inevitable confrontation that will follow. By the end of this act, the stakes have shifted dramatically. What started as a casual potluck intended as a friendly social gesture has transformed into a testing ground for trust, honesty, and relational boundaries. The audience is left with multiple open questions. Will Natalie confront Gino directly? How will he justify the timing of his honesty? Is this a moment that will push her away permanently? Or can it still be a turning point? The act closes with Natalie visibly processing the revelation, her expression unreadable, yet unmistakably altered. Behind the walls of that potluck, Gino continues unaware, enjoying social chatter and small talk, while outside, Natalie is already navigating an emotional recalibration. The narrative tension is now primed for the next stage, where confrontation, reflection, and the unspooling of hidden truths will collide. The audience knows more than Gino, the stakes are higher than he realizes, and the questions about trust, transparency, and intentions remain unresolved, perfectly setting the stage for the next act in the story. Natalie sits back for a moment, her mind spinning faster than the casual chatter around her. On the surface, it's a simple potluck, a friendly gathering, some laughter, a few bites of food, but the revelation she just received hits her like a cold wave. Gino, the man she once trusted, has been talking to other women. Not casually, but enough that it worries her. Enough that it triggers memories she had hoped were behind her. And just like that, the walls she thought she'd torn down in their relationship start going back up. Technically, she reminds herself, they're not exclusive. That's the logical part of her brain speaking. He didn't cheat in the traditional sense. From a neutral perspective, Gino is single and entitled to communicate with whoever he wants. But logic only goes so far when history is pulling you in another direction. It's the pattern, the repeating mistakes that gnaws at her. This isn't the first time secrecy has created tension between them. It's not even the second. There's a history here. A record of small omissions, of half-truths, of things left unsaid until they festered into something larger. Natalie's worry isn't about morality, it's about reliability. Can she trust someone who seems incapable of full transparency? That question now occupies her every thought. Gino framed his earlier behavior as honesty, he admitted it after all, but the delivery method makes all the difference. Confessing to a friend before telling her directly doesn't feel like maturity, it feels careless. Worse, it feels eerily familiar. A déjà vu of the times he hid things from her in the past. This is what makes her suspicious, what keeps her heart and mind in a constant state of tension. The psychological angle here is subtle but profound. This isn't just about what he did, it's about what he represents. Lying by omission, as Natalie sees it, is worse than outright deception. A direct lie can be confronted, resolved, or forgiven. Concealment, however, corrodes trust slowly. It plants a seed of doubt that keeps growing because you never get a clear picture of what's really happening. Natalie knows this. She's lived it. And now, the audience can feel her internal struggle building like a storm. Desire versus caution, attraction versus skepticism, hope versus experience. Meanwhile, fans watching this scenario are naturally divided. On one side, you have the logical argument, Gino is single, Natalie is single, nothing technically wrong has occurred. The audience can understand this perspective. On the other, there's the relational perspective. If he genuinely wants Natalie back, why not be fully open with her first? Why let someone else know before she does? Here, moral tension takes center stage. Who is right? Who is overreacting? The narrative invites viewers to take sides, to argue, and to engage in discussions outside the video, extending retention even beyond the watch. Natalie voices a thought that crystallizes her feelings in a single powerful line. If he thinks he can make a fool of me again, he's crazy. The words aren't just a warning, they're a boundary statement, a psychological shield. She isn't angry about the messages themselves, she's angry that history might repeat itself. That pattern recognition is one of the most human responses in relationships. We forgive once, maybe twice, but repeated behavior without accountability activates our self-protection instincts. And that's exactly what's happening here. At the same time, Natalie wrestles with her attraction to Gino. The night before, they shared a moment of intimacy, a closeness that was comforting and confusing at the same time. It was real. Yet it complicates the clarity she needs now. She isn't sure if the emotional pull she feels is clouding her judgment, or if it's just another reason why honesty is essential. This creates an open loop. Is her caution rational? Or is it fueled by insecurity and past hurt? The tension isn't external, it's internal, layered, and psychologically rich. Then there's the matter of intent. Did Gino actually intend to pursue these other women? Or is he just responding to messages passively without serious thought about the consequence? Natalie doesn't know, and the audience can sense that uncertainty building. This is classic long-form narrative tension. The viewer knows more than the character, creating anticipation for the moment of revelation and confrontation. Every small gesture, every hesitation from Gino in the coming scenes is now loaded with potential meaning, keeping viewers glued to the story. As she sits there reflecting on the history and the current situation, Natalie begins to mentally reassess the entire relationship. Every past decision, every previous betrayal, even the minor ones, now gets filtered through the lens of this new revelation. Can she trust him to act differently this time? Or is this just another cycle in a repeating pattern? This is the emotional weight of the act. She isn't reacting to a single message or a single night. She's reacting to a pattern that could continue indefinitely if unaddressed. This moment also exposes a larger theme for the audience, the tension between being technically right and relationally responsible. Gino may be within his rights to talk to other women. He may even consider his behavior honest. But relationships aren't governed by technicalities. They're built on perception, empathy, and emotional accountability. Natalie's anger and suspicion aren't irrational. They're rooted in lived experience and a clear understanding of the relational rules that matter most. As the scene unfolds, Natalie's processing shifts from internal reflection to an emerging readiness to act. She is beginning to recognize that a line has been crossed, not in legality, but in trust and expectation. Her statement, her boundary declaration, if he thinks he can make a fool of me again, he's crazy, marks the transition from silent concern to active consideration. The audience feels this shift as the tension escalates. Every viewer now anticipates what she will do next. Will she confront him immediately or let the knowledge simmer for a dramatic reveal? Meanwhile, Gino remains oblivious. He is inside, perhaps laughing at a joke, perhaps unaware that his decisions have already triggered a new cycle of suspicion and doubt. This dual perspective, where the audience is aware of both knowledge and ignorance, is a key retention strategy. It sustains engagement because viewers are compelled to keep watching to see when and how Gino will discover what they already know. By the end of this act, the stakes have escalated beyond social discomfort or minor missteps. The emotional landscape has shifted dramatically. Natalie isn't just annoyed or confused, she's actively questioning the relationship. She's processing not just Gino's actions, but the larger implications for trust, secrecy, and her own emotional safety. The moral tension is clear. Gino may be technically correct, but Natalie is emotionally justified in her skepticism. The act closes with Natalie's expression hardening as she considers what comes next. The potluck has ended, but the real drama is only beginning. Gino remains unaware, and the audience is left with a lingering question. When will the confrontation happen, and how will the relationship survive or fail once the truth is fully in the open? Natalie sits quietly at the table, trying to piece together her feelings while the chatter around her continues. On the surface, the potluck seems harmless, friends laughing, plates clinking, small talk about work, hobbies, vacations. But beneath that normalcy, the emotional undercurrent is thick, almost suffocating. What was supposed to be a casual introduction for Gino has turned into a subtle tribunal, and Natalie is the one caught in the middle. She feels it in her chest, the growing divide between what she wants and what her friends believe she deserves. Her closest friend leans in, speaking with a clarity that makes everyone at the table pause, even if just for a split second. Natalie, she says, I don't like Gino. Not even a little. Those words hang in the air heavier than anyone realizes. For Natalie, it's a jolt. An immediate recalibration of everything she thought she knew about the night, the conversation, and even Gino himself. The friend isn't making idle chit-chat, she's drawing a boundary, declaring a position, signaling disapproval that cannot be ignored. The psychological angle here is brutal in its subtlety. Friends act as mirrors in relationships. They reflect concerns we may not even want to admit ourselves. When someone close voices doubt or distrust, it's no longer just a personal dilemma, it becomes a social one. Suddenly, Natalie has to weigh her private feelings against a collective judgment. This external pressure amplifies every internal conflict she's already experiencing. Desire, fear, trust, and history collide all at once. Gino, on the other hand, walks into this scenario thinking he's winning small victory. He assumed that being invited to meet Natalie's friends was a milestone, a tacit acceptance into her inner circle. Every smile, every polite nod he interprets as approval. But the social dynamics have shifted entirely in the blink of an eye. The power no longer resides with him. By revealing the truth to Natalie's friend before Natalie herself, he inadvertently gave the group leverage, placing himself under scrutiny he hadn't anticipated. This is where the first mini tension spike hits. Natalie's friend leans closer, lowering her voice, making it intimate but cutting. He's hiding something. The words are simple, but the implication is catastrophic. In one sentence, she casts doubt, seeds mistrust, and challenges the entire narrative that Gino has tried to construct. Now it isn't just about talking to other women, it's about honesty, about intentions, about the entire foundation of their second chance. Natalie's mind races. She remembers the night before, the cuddling, the shared laughter, the temporary closeness that felt like a bridge being rebuilt. But now, that bridge seems dangerously unstable. Every moment of warmth is being reinterpreted through the lens of secrecy. Her friend's skepticism forces her to question her own instincts. Is she being too lenient? Too forgiving? Or is this a genuine reflection of the problems that never went away? The moral tension escalates further because this isn't just internal. Natalie is being pulled in two directions at once. Her emotional desire to reconnect with Gino versus the collective judgment of people whose opinions she trusts implicitly. Friends often see things more clearly because they're not invested emotionally in the same way, but their influence can also be destabilizing. For Natalie, every glance, every sigh, every subtle gesture from her friend acts like a reminder that what she wants and what she should want might not align. Meanwhile, Gino remains blissfully unaware of the social storm brewing around him. He's laughing, holding a plate of food, trying to make small talk with someone he barely knows. He interprets every nod and smile as acceptance. Every subtle warning or eye roll from Natalie's friends is invisible to him. This dual perspective creates the tension that keeps the audience glued to the screen. They know more than the character, and they anticipate the moment of collision. The audience is also left to consider human behavior in extreme social influence scenarios. When a close-knit group expresses disapproval, it creates a social hierarchy where emotional loyalty is tested. Natalie's position is no longer about personal choice alone. She's now navigating the expectations and judgments of those she cares about. Will she defend Gino, asserting that her feelings supersede her friend's opinions? Or will she distance herself, valuing their insight and collective wisdom over personal attachment? As the conversation continues, Natalie's friend becomes more candid. She doesn't stop at mere dislike, she articulates the subtle behaviors that trigger her concern. Avoiding eye contact, vague explanations, half-truths, all the things that might have seemed minor to an outsider are magnified when viewed through the lens of experience and loyalty. Natalie is forced to listen, forced to process, and forced to question whether the emotional closeness she felt last night was genuine or just another layer of self-deception. Another mini tension spike hits when Natalie realizes the depth of her friend's conviction. This isn't casual opinion, this is a warning. And it isn't just about one person's feelings, her friend represents a broader network of trust, a social safety net that Natalie has relied on for years. The implication is simple yet terrifying. If she continues down this path, she might isolate herself from the people who have consistently acted as her emotional compass. The stakes escalate even further when Natalie begins to visualize the potential fallout. If she continues pursuing Gino while her friends remain distrustful, it could fracture her social support system. Arguments could flare, gatherings could become tense, loyalty could be tested, and relationships that have taken years to nurture could be strained. All of this weighs on her as she sips her drink, trying to appear calm while internally, every nerve is on alert. Gino, still unaware, is about to be blindsided. He hasn't yet realized that the moment he chose honesty with the wrong audience has set off a ripple effect that threatens not just his image, but the very possibility of reconciliation. The social power has shifted dramatically. He assumed the potluck would cement his role as an accepted partner. Instead, he has ignited a critical evaluation of his intentions, character, and transparency. Natalie's conflict reaches its peak when she hears another comment from her friend, subtle, but cutting. You deserve someone who doesn't make you doubt them every second. This isn't just advice, it's judgment, a reflection of concern, and an ultimatum wrapped in subtle phrasing. For Natalie, it crystallizes the stakes. She must decide whether to defend a man who has repeatedly tested boundaries or to protect herself by creating distance. The room feels smaller now. Each laugh seems louder, each glance sharper. The casual warmth of a friend gathering has dissolved into a crucible of emotional decision-making. Every second holds weight, and the audience feels it. The anticipation grows. What will Natalie do? Will she confront Gino immediately, or will she let the information simmer, creating a slow burn tension that could explode at any moment? By the end of this act, the damage has spread far beyond the initial revelation. Natalie's friend group is now a vector of conflict, adding social pressure to an already delicate emotional situation. Gino's obliviousness only intensifies the dramatic irony. The audience can sense the impending confrontation, the potential for misunderstanding, and the fragile state of the relationship. The emotional stakes are now at their highest since the night he crossed the couch boundary. The act closes with Natalie's expression a mixture of anger, sadness, and uncertainty. She is no longer just questioning Gino, she's questioning whether the emotional closeness she experienced is worth the social and psychological cost. The potluck, intended to integrate Gino into her life, may have instead highlighted the cracks in their second chance, setting the stage for a confrontation that could redefine everything. The aftermath of the potluck lingers in the air like a heavy fog, and Natalie is left sitting with more questions than answers. On the surface, Gino hasn't broken any explicit rules. He hasn't cheated, he hasn't lied outright, but trust isn't built on technicalities. It's built on consistency, transparency, and the subtle cues that tell a partner, I have nothing to hide from you. And in this moment, Natalie is painfully aware that those cues are missing. She reflects on the night before, the closeness she felt, the cuddling that might have seemed romantic. It's confusing, even contradictory. There's a warmth there, a temporary sense of intimacy that makes her question her own instincts. But beneath that warmth, there's a cold undercurrent. The creeping realization that Gino's behaviors, small, seemingly innocuous actions, are part of a larger pattern she's seen before. This isn't about one night, one potluck, or one conversation. It's about repeated missteps that erode confidence over time. From a psychological standpoint, what we see in Gino is a classic pattern of self-sabotage wrapped in the guise of honesty. He believes that revealing uncomfortable truths will demonstrate maturity, that his willingness to admit talking to other women somehow proves integrity. But he miscalculates. Timing and audience matter in human relationships. By sharing that information with Natalie's friend first, he created a social ripple that undermined the very trust he hoped to rebuild. Every revelation in this context becomes a test of perception, not a demonstration of virtue. Natalie begins to connect the dots. It isn't that Gino is intentionally malicious, it's that he doesn't understand the social and emotional consequences of his timing. He either hides things too long, creating suspicion, or discloses them to the wrong person, creating mistrust. In either case, the outcome is the same. Natalie is left questioning not just his honesty, but his judgment. And judgment, she realizes, is inseparable from trust. This is where the long-term implications start to take shape. If Gino wants this relationship to survive, he can't rely on fleeting moments of closeness or awkward confessions at the wrong time. Rebuilding trust requires patience, consistency, and above all, awareness of how his actions ripple through Natalie's world. Every small misstep now is magnified because of history. Natalie remembers past incidents where secrecy caused tension, where honesty was too little, too late, or misdirected. These memories aren't resentment, they're caution, a protective mechanism that keeps her from being blindsided again. As the reflection deepens, the audience sees the emotional complexity of the situation. This isn't a simple story of right or wrong. Gino did nothing technically wrong, and yet the emotional fallout is undeniable. Relationships rarely collapse from one dramatic moment. They collapse from repeated small cracks, incremental failures to honor boundaries, to anticipate reactions, to act in ways that consistently reassure the other person. And for Natalie, these cracks are already visible again. She also grapples with an important question about human behavior. Can people change patterns that are deeply ingrained? Gino may understand the theory of honesty and trust, but execution is different. Timing, discretion, social awareness, these aren't things learned in a single relationship. They are habits shaped over years, and patterns once established are remarkably persistent. Natalie's doubt isn't paranoia, it's a realistic appraisal of what she's seen repeatedly. The real question isn't whether Gino wants to be better, it's whether he can be better. Another layer unfolds when considering the audience's perspective. Fans watching this story are split because they're seeing the nuance of human behavior. Some sympathize with Gino, applauding his honesty, believing he deserves credit for at least trying. Others side with Natalie, recognizing the pattern of secrecy and the emotional cost it imposes. This duality mirrors real-world relationship dynamics. People can act with integrity, yet still undermine trust if they mismanage timing, context, or communication. Natalie's own internal dialogue becomes the focal point. She considers what trust actually means for her. It isn't just about avoiding betrayal, it's about being confident that the person in front of her can act in ways that consistently honor the emotional contract of a relationship. Every previous incident where Gino withheld, delayed, or misdirected information now colors her perception of the present. Trust, she realizes, is fragile. And rebuilding it isn't about grand gestures, it's about repeated proof over time. At this stage, the reflection shifts from analysis to decision-making. Natalie isn't questioning her feelings in a vacuum, she's evaluating Gino's capacity to change within a realistic framework. Can he recalibrate his approach? Can he learn to disclose things at the right time, to the right person, with sensitivity and awareness? Or is this cycle destined to repeat itself, leaving her emotionally vulnerable once again? The final insight crystallizes: relationships aren't undone by dramatic mistakes alone. They're undone by cumulative, unaddressed patterns that gradually erode trust. Natalie sees that clearly now. The night of cuddling, the potluck, the uncomfortable confessions, all of these moments could have been isolated incidents, but because they echo past behavior, they carry extra weight. The emotional ledger is no longer balanced. Every misstep adds interest to a debt of mistrust that can't be ignored. As the act closes, Natalie's gaze shifts, contemplative and measured. The warmth she felt for Gino hasn't vanished, but it is now tempered by caution. She's thinking ahead, weighing the small cracks against the potential for stability. The audience is left with a profound, layered question. The issue is no longer about attraction or even about specific action. The real question is whether Gino is capable of changing the patterns that threaten the foundation of their connection. The closing hook sets the stage for reflection beyond the episode itself. For viewers, the story isn't over. It's a psychological case study on trust, patterns, and the slow, often invisible ways relationships are built or broken. The suspense doesn't come from immediate drama, but from the lingering uncertainty. Will Gino learn to navigate trust wisely, or will history quietly repeat itself, leaving Natalie to protect herself once again?